Taylor Swift was at the pinnacle of her career, embarking on a world tour that spanned continents. But on one fateful night, after a dazzling performance in Paris, a blinding light engulfed her. When she regained consciousness, she found herself far from Earth. In front of her loomed an enormous spacecraft, its alien technology far surpassing anything humanity had ever known. A group of strange beings surrounded her, their gazes filled with suspicion and hostility. She tried to steady herself, but her heart pounded, and her breath came in short, frantic gasps, making it impossible to think clearly. The walls around her were sleek, metallic, and reflective, glowing with an eerie blue hue. The vast chamber was sterile and cold, devoid of any sign of familiarity. The beings standing around her were tall, their metallic-hued skin shimmering under the dim light, their eyes glowing as if containing an entire galaxy within them. They communicated in an unfamiliar language, but what frightened Taylor the most was the wariness in their eyes, as if she were a threat. One of them stepped forward, noticeably taller and more imposing than the others. His dark armor clung to his powerful frame, every inch of him exuding the aura of a seasoned warrior. His voice was deep and unyielding, yet through a translator device strapped to his wrist, Taylor could understand his words. "You are Taylor Swift, the one who has activated our relic. You are a danger to this galaxy." Taylor's eyes widened in shock. A relic? What were they talking about? She was just a singer, a songwriter, not a scientist, not a warrior of the cosmos. She shook her head, her voice trembling with fear. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a normal human. I didn't activate anything." The warrior narrowed his eyes as if assessing her words. He stepped closer, and Taylor instinctively backed away, only to feel the cold, metallic wall pressing against her back. He studied her with piercing intensity, his gaze cutting through her like a blade. "We will verify that." He issued a command, and immediately, two other warriors moved forward, grabbing Taylor's arms. She struggled, desperate to break free from their iron grip, but it was useless. Panic surged through her veins, and then she remembered the necklace around her neck. A simple gift from her best friend. As one of the warriors reached for it, the entire room suddenly burst into light. A strange energy pulsed from the small gemstone on the necklace, and in that instant, every alien around her recoiled, their faces filled with alarm. The leader, the one who had just declared her a threat, spoke in a hushed, grave voice. "Impossible. You are the key." Taylor had no idea what was happening, but she knew one thing: she was no longer just a pop star. And the world she once knew had changed forever. Taylor was taken before Varion, the formidable leader of the Varion, a race of infamous alien warriors. He stood tall upon a raised platform, his dark armor accentuating his imposing presence. His eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto her as if analyzing every detail of her existence. Around them, the chamber was filled with Varion elites, their silent stares amplifying the tension in the air. Varion's voice echoed through the chamber, deep and unwavering. "Your music activated the supreme relic, an artifact we have sought for centuries. You have unleashed forces you do not comprehend." Taylor's heart pounded in her chest. "I don't know anything about a relic. I was just performing a concert. How could my music possibly trigger something like that?" Her voice was laced with desperation, but Varion remained unmoved. He descended the platform with slow, deliberate steps. "Ignorance does not absolve you. Your presence alone has set events into motion that could bring devastation upon us all. You are a liability." Taylor swallowed hard, fear and frustration battling within her. "If I've really done something, then let me help fix it. I don't even know what's happening." Varion scoffed. "You are weak. A mere human. You lack the strength, the knowledge, and the will to face what is coming." He turned away, as if the conversation had already ended. "Prepare her for interrogation. We will extract the truth." Two armored guards stepped forward, but before they could seize her, the same energy that had erupted from her necklace earlier pulsed again, forcing everyone to step back. This time, Varion's eyes narrowed not with suspicion, but with something resembling intrigue. He studied her once more, as if reconsidering his assumptions. "Perhaps," he murmured, "there is more to you than meets the eye?" Taylor had no idea what was in store for her, but she understood one thing: she was no longer just a captive. She had become something far more important. Taylor sat in a dimly lit cell, her mind racing with questions. The walls of her prison pulsed with an eerie blue light, smooth yet impossibly cold under her fingertips. She refused to crumble under the weight of fear. Instead, she was determined to understand the situation she had been thrown into. She had spent years mastering her craft, conquering the music industry, and breaking barriers. She wouldn't let this be the thing that broke her. Determined to make sense of her surroundings, Taylor pressed her palms against one of the smooth panels, feeling for any kind of control mechanism. To her surprise, the interface responded. A holographic display materialized before her, shifting between alien symbols and glowing glyphs. Taylor's sharp eyes scanned the display, searching for anything recognizable. As she experimented with the interface, she discovered that the ship's AI was responsive to sound. A soft hum escaped her lips, a simple melody she had composed years ago. The AI reacted instantly, flickering with renewed energy. Encouraged by this discovery, she began to hum a tune, her voice intertwining with the ship's own frequencies. The glowing glyphs stabilized, and she realized she was communicating with the ship itself. For days, Taylor worked tirelessly, piecing together bits of the Varion language. Slowly, the AI responded with rudimentary translations, giving her glimpses into the world of her captors. She learned that the Varions were warriors, a race bred for conquest and discipline. Their civilization thrived on order, and true music was an anomaly to them. Their communications were sharp, direct, and calculated. There was no room for artistic expression. One evening, lost in the depths of her curiosity, Taylor found herself softly singing a song from her latest album. The soft notes drifted through the cold chamber, weaving through the sterile air. She closed her eyes, momentarily allowing herself to forget the alien prison and instead imagine the glow of stage lights, the warmth of an adoring crowd. Unbeknownst to her, Varion stood just beyond the cell's entrance. He had intended to observe her progress with the ship's interface, but the moment her voice reached him, he felt an unfamiliar sensation, something that unsettled him. The notes stirred something deep within him, a feeling he could neither name nor understand. He had spent his entire life in preparation for battle, forging himself into a ruthless leader. Emotions were a weakness. Hesitation was unacceptable. Yet, here he was, frozen in place by the hauntingly beautiful resonance of her voice. He watched as her fingers brushed against the glowing interface, as though she were conducting a silent symphony. He could see the energy reacting to her presence, as if the ship itself recognized something in her that he could not comprehend. Varion stepped forward, his heavy footsteps breaking the moment. Taylor's voice faltered as she turned toward him, startled. For a brief moment, their eyes met hers, filled with defiance and caution, his masked with something deeper. "You manipulate the ship's system with your voice," he stated, his tone neutral, yet edged with intrigue. Taylor hesitated before answering. "I think it responds to frequencies. Music is just another form of energy, isn't it?" Varion studied her carefully. "Music is irrelevant in war. It has no function." Taylor let out a short laugh, crossing her arms. That's because you've never really listened. Varion frowned, stepping closer. And you believe music has power? Taylor met his gaze without fear. I know it does. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The ship hummed softly around them, as if eavesdropping on a conversation. Varion found himself uncharacteristically intrigued. He had expected defiance, but this was something else entirely. He had captured a human and insignificant being from a lesser world. Yet, as she stood before him, challenging his perception of reality with nothing more than her voice, he realized she was far from insignificant. Something within him told him this was only the beginning. The ship trembled under the relentless barrage of Zyphorian fire, the deep rumble of impact echoing through the corridors like the growl of an angered beast. Taylor braced herself against the cold metal wall, her breath quick and shallow. She could hear the distant clamor of battle energy blasts searing through the air, the sharp clang of weapons colliding, and the guttural cries of warriors locked in combat. Fear coursed through her veins, but she fought to steady herself. This was no longer just about her. Something bigger was at play. Varion stood at the center of the chaos, his stance unwavering despite the storm raging around him. His blade, a weapon forged from the core of a dying star, danced through the air with lethal precision. Each strike was a calculated movement, each dodge a display of his honed instincts. His enemies were formidable, but he was Varion, the warlord of the Zyphorians. And he did not fall easily. Yet, even he could not deny the overwhelming numbers of the Zyphorian assault. Their warships, sleek and menacing, maneuvered with brutal efficiency, their weapons tearing through the Zyphorian defenses. The ship's shields flickered, struggling to maintain integrity. It was only a matter of time before they would fail entirely. Taylor stumbled forward, desperate to find a way to help. Her mind raced through everything she had learned about the Zyphorian ship. It responded to her music. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could use that to their advantage. Taking a deep breath, she began to sing. The notes started soft, uncertain, but as she pushed forward, the melody grew in strength. The ship responded, its walls glowing in synchrony with her voice. The energy within the vessel shifted, bending to the frequency she created. She had no idea what she was doing, but she could feel the ship reacting, resonating with something ancient and powerful. Varion, in the midst of a deadly clash, caught sight of her. His first instinct was to command her to stop to find shelter, but then he saw it. The ship was changing. The enemy's blasts that once tore through their defenses now met unseen resistance. The Zyphorian technology, attuned to her song, was evolving, adapting. It was protecting her. The Zyphorians hesitated, their attack faltering as they realized their weapons were losing effectiveness. Varion seized the opportunity, his blade a blur of destruction as he cut through the confusion. He fought his way toward Taylor, his body moving on sheer instinct, pain from his wounds ignored in the heat of the battle. Just as he reached her, a Zyphorian soldier lunged from the shadows, blade aimed at Taylor's heart. Without thinking, Varion threw himself between them, his arm catching the strike meant for her. A sharp, searing pain tore through him, but he did not falter. He turned, driving his own weapon deep into his enemy's chest. Taylor's voice caught in her throat as she saw the crimson streak of Varion's blood against his armor. "You're hurt." He gritted his teeth, waving off her concern. "We need to end this. Now." She looked around at the battlefield, at the chaos still unfolding. She didn't have a weapon, didn't have the training, but she had her voice. Summoning every ounce of strength, she sang again, louder, stronger. The ship pulsed with energy, the very structure of it responding in ways no one had ever seen before. The enemy ships faltered, their systems destabilizing. The Zephyrians took the advantage, pushing back against their ancient rivals. Varion pressed a hand against his wound, his gaze locked onto Taylor as she stood at the heart of the storm, wielding nothing but the power of her song. And in that moment, he understood she was no ordinary human. She was something far more dangerous, far more powerful. And he would not let her fall into the hands of the Zyphorians. Varion's breaths were ragged, his body aching from the wounds sustained in battle. The ship was barely holding together, its core systems failing one by one under the strain of the Zyphorian assault. He had fought countless battles, had stood against legions, but never had he been forced into such a desperate retreat. Taylor, standing by his side, had been instrumental in their survival. Her voice had turned the tide of the battle, had bent the ship's very essence to their will. But it wasn't enough. The Zyphorians were relentless, and they would not stop until she was in their grasp. With no other options, Varion activated the emergency evacuation protocol. The ship's AI, now partially attuned to Taylor's frequency, initiated the sequence without hesitation. The floor beneath them trembled as the escape pod prepared for launch. Taylor's heart pounded as she looked at Varion. "What about your crew?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. "They have their own escape routes," he replied. "But you and we cannot be captured." The Zyphorian warships loomed closer, their weapons primed for a final strike. Without waiting for another word, Varion pulled Taylor into the pod and sealed the hatch. The moment he activated the launch sequence, the pod shot away from the crumbling ship, hurtling towards the unknown. Taylor gripped the seat as the pod spiraled through space. The view outside was a blur of fire and debris. Then, suddenly, they were free, breaking through the chaos, descending towards the surface of a distant planet. The impact was brutal. The pod crashed through dense foliage, skidding across the terrain before coming to a halt. The silence that followed was deafening. Taylor unbuckled herself, shaking off the dizziness. "Are you okay?" she asked, turning to Varion. He grunted, pressing a hand to his wounded side. "I will survive." The pod's door hissed open, revealing an alien landscape bathed in eerie twilight. The sky above shimmered with hues of violet and gold. Strange flora pulsed with bioluminescence, and the air was thick with unfamiliar scents. "Where are we?" Taylor whispered, stepping onto the soft, moss-like ground. Varion surveyed the surroundings. A remote planet. One of the few uncharted worlds beyond Zyphorian control. "We should be safe for now." Taylor exhaled, trying to steady herself. She was far from home, stranded on an alien world with only a wounded warrior for company. But despite the fear gnawing at her, she knew one thing: she wasn't just a helpless musician anymore. "We need shelter," Varion said, his voice gruff yet controlled. "And food." Taylor nodded. "Then let's find it together." For the first time since her abduction, she felt something unexpected: a sense of purpose. This was a new world, a new challenge. And she was ready to face it. Taylor stood in the heart of the alien ruins, her breath caught in her throat as the artifact before her pulsed with an eerie, golden light. It was unlike anything she had ever seen: a floating crystalline structure, its surface shifting and reforming in intricate patterns as if it were alive. The moment she had started humming a melody, it had responded, glowing brighter, sending ripples of energy through the cavern. Varion stood behind her, his stance tense, his wounded arm held close to his side. He had seen many wonders in his time as a Zyphorian warrior, but this was beyond anything he had ever encountered. "What is it doing?" Taylor whispered, her voice laced with both awe and fear. Varion's expression was unreadable as he stepped closer. It recognizes you? Before Taylor could respond, a surge of energy shot out from the artifact, encircling her in threads of golden light. A rush of knowledge flooded her mind, images of a long-lost civilization, of beings who had created the artifact and used it to shape worlds. She gasped, staggering back, but the light held her in place. Varion reached for her, his instincts screaming to pull her away, but the moment his fingers brushed against the light, a shockwave sent him sprawling to the ground. The artifact's energy coiled around Taylor like a living entity, harmonizing with the frequency of her song. And then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The golden light receded, leaving Taylor breathless, her hands shaking. I saw something. A civilization. They created this. And they knew me. Varion's eyes darkened. Impossible. This artifact is ancient. There is no way they could have known of a human from Earth. Taylor shook her head, her heart pounding. No, they didn't know me specifically. But they knew someone like me. Someone with the ability to interact with this thing. Varion's expression turned grim. That means you're more valuable than we thought. And not just to us. A sound echoed from the entrance of the ruins, a low, menacing growl. Varion's blade was in his hand in an instant, his body shifting into a defensive stance. We need to leave. Now. Taylor didn't argue. Whatever had just happened had painted a target on her back, and she had the sinking feeling that whoever was coming wouldn't be as understanding as Varion. She took one last glance at the artifact before following him into the shadows, her mind still reeling from the secrets it had revealed. Taylor paced inside the makeshift shelter they had built within the dense jungle of the foreign planet. The tension between her and Varion was suffocating, an unspoken force that neither of them could fully confront. Her mind was in turmoil, still reeling from the discovery of the artifact's connection to her and the responsibility that now seemed to weigh on her shoulders. Varion stood at the entrance, his sharp gaze scanning the distance for any signs of the Zyphor threat. His body was rigid, his mind clearly preoccupied. Taylor had spent enough time with him to recognize the battle raging within him, not just against their enemies, but against himself. Finally, she couldn't take the silence anymore. Varion, talk to me? He didn't turn to face her. There is nothing to say. She crossed her arms. That's not true, and you know it. His fingers tightened around the hilt of his blade. This is not the time for distractions. Taylor stepped closer, her voice softer. So, I'm a distraction now? Varion exhaled sharply and finally turned to face her. You are more than that. A lump formed in her throat. She wasn't sure what she had expected him to say, but the depth of emotion in his voice made her heart pound. You have changed things, Taylor. For me. For my people. And for yourself. She looked down, her fingers brushing against the cool metal of the artifact she now carried with her. I never asked for this. No, Varion agreed. But the universe does not grant us the privilege of choosing our destiny. A sharp noise from the trees made them both tense. Varion instinctively placed himself between her and the sound. Taylor gripped the artifact tightly, feeling its faint hum beneath her fingertips. We need to move, Varion said. The Zyphor are closing in. Taylor nodded, pushing aside her thoughts. There would be time for emotions later. Right now, survival was the only thing that mattered. As they slipped into the shadows of the jungle, Taylor knew one thing for certain: she wasn't just caught between two worlds. She was caught between her heart and a war that could change the fate of the galaxy. Taylor felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her as the air trembled with the distant sound of approaching ships. The Zyphor had found them, and this time, there would be no escape. The sky above was already streaked with the ominous glow of their war vessels, casting eerie shadows across the desolate landscape. Varion stood beside her, his expression as unreadable as ever, but the tension in his posture told her everything. He was ready for battle. His people had fought the Zyphor for centuries, and now, the conflict had come to its inevitable climax. "We can't outrun them this time," Taylor said, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her gut. Varion nodded grimly. "No. We fight." Taylor's fingers curled around the artifact, its smooth surface thrumming with a power that seemed almost sentient. Ever since she had first awakened its energy, she had felt something within it stir, a force beyond comprehension, waiting to be unleashed. She had always believed that music was her greatest gift, but now she realized that it had led her here for a reason far beyond what she could have imagined. A deafening explosion shattered the ground nearby, sending debris flying. Varion pushed Taylor behind him, his blade drawn as the first wave of Zyphor soldiers descended from their ships, weapons raised. The battle erupted in a violent clash of energy blasts and steel, the air thick with the scent of burning ozone and scorched earth. Taylor clutched the artifact tighter. She could feel its energy pulsing in time with her heartbeat, growing stronger as if responding to her determination. But she didn't know how to control it fully. Not yet. Varion fought with ruthless efficiency, cutting down enemies with precise, deadly strikes. Yet even he was only one warrior against an army. The Zyphor forces were relentless, pushing forward with sheer numbers. Taylor knew they couldn't hold out forever. And then she felt it, the call of the artifact, a song without words, an ancient melody that resonated deep within her soul. Without thinking, she lifted her voice, letting the melody escape her lips. The effect was immediate. The air around her shimmered as waves of golden energy radiated outward, forming a barrier between them and the enemy. Varion turned to her, astonishment flickering in his normally impassive eyes. "Taylor." She didn't have time to answer. The Zyphor leader, a towering figure clad in dark armor, stepped forward, raising a clawed hand. "You think your power can stop us?" His voice reverberated through the battlefield. "You are nothing but a tool of the artifact, a means to an end. Surrender it, and perhaps we will spare you." Taylor met his gaze, unflinching. "Not a chance." With that, she poured every ounce of her will into the artifact. The golden barrier expanded, pushing the Zyphor forces back, but Taylor felt the price of its power. A sharp, tearing sensation rippled through her chest, a cold realization dawning on her: this energy was tied to her very existence. The more she used it, the further she drifted from everything she had once known. Varion saw the strain on her face. He stepped forward, gripping her shoulders. "You don't have to do this alone." Taylor looked up at him, the weight of her decision clear in her eyes. "If I don't, we all die." A moment of silence passed between them. Then, Varion did something she never expected. He placed his hand over hers, over the artifact. The energy responded instantly, flaring brighter as if acknowledging his presence. The bond between them, something neither of them had fully understood until now, was the key. Together, they channeled the artifact's power, forming a shield that stretched across the battlefield. The Zyphor forces recoiled, their leader snarling in frustration. "This is not the end," he spat before signaling a retreat. As the Zyphor ships disappeared into the darkened sky, the battlefield grew silent. Taylor let out a shuddering breath, feeling the last remnants of energy draining from her. She staggered, and Varion caught her before she could fall. "You did it," he murmured, his grip firm yet gentle. Taylor shook her head, tears burning her eyes. "No, we did. But I can feel it, Varion, the artifact, it's pulling me away. Varion stiffened. What do you mean? She closed her eyes, feeling the truth settle in her bones. To fully activate it, to ensure the Zyphor never return, I have to let go of Earth. Varion's expression darkened, but he said nothing. Because deep down, they both knew the truth. Taylor had a choice to make. And whatever she decided, there was no turning back. Varion stood in the dim glow of the control chamber, his expression unreadable as he gazed at Taylor. The weight of the decision before him was heavier than anything he had faced in battle. He knew what keeping her meant. She was the key to an ancient power, a force that could alter the course of history. But she was also more than that. She was Taylor, defiant, brilliant, and full of a light that had somehow seeped into the cracks of his armored soul. Taylor's heart pounded. She could see the internal struggle in Varion's eyes. The warrior, the commander, the leader of his people, he was all of those things. But to her, he had become something else. Someone she had come to trust, admire, and perhaps even love. You have to choose, Varion finally said, his voice low, steady. Your world or mine? She swallowed hard. How could she choose? Staying meant embracing a destiny she never asked for. It meant fighting alongside Varion, standing against forces she barely understood. But leaving meant walking away from the only being who had ever seen her for more than just a star on a stage. She turned away, looking out at the vast expanse of stars. Earth was out there. Her life, her music, her dreams. But were they still hers? Or had she become someone else in the process of surviving, of fighting, of feeling? Varion stepped closer. Taylor, whatever you decide, it is yours to make. No one else can choose for you. She exhaled sharply, a single tear slipping down her cheek. And what about you? What do you choose? For the first time, Varion hesitated. Duty has always been my path. But now I am uncertain. Because for the first time, I wish to choose for myself. Silence stretched between them, heavy and charged with unspoken words. Finally, Taylor took a deep breath. Then let me do the same. Varion nodded. Then decide, Taylor Swift. Who do you wish to be? Taylor closed her eyes, listening to the rhythm of her own heartbeat. And when she opened them, she knew her answer. Taylor stood on the bridge of the Varion ship, her gaze fixed on the swirling cosmos beyond the viewport. Earth was out there, waiting for her, but the idea of leaving felt like severing a part of her soul. She had spent her entire life singing about love, loss, and longing, but never had she understood those emotions as deeply as she did now. Varion stood beside her, silent. He had given her the choice, and now he waited. His eyes, always sharp and calculating, held something softer, something he never allowed himself to show. Taylor turned to him, memorizing the way he looked under the dim glow of the control panel lights, the way his presence had become as familiar to her as her own reflection. This isn't goodbye, she whispered, her voice steadier than she felt. Varion's jaw tightened. It will have to be. Our worlds, our lives, they do not align. Taylor shook her head. I don't believe that. Not completely. Varion exhaled, stepping closer. Then what do you believe, Taylor Swift? She searched his face, looking past the hardened warrior to the man beneath. That no matter where I go, no matter what happens, a part of me will always be here. With you. And if there's even the smallest chance that our paths will cross again, I'll be waiting. Varion's gaze flickered, and for a moment, She thought he might say something, might tell her to stay, might confess something he had spent his whole life suppressing. But instead, he simply nodded. Then let us hope the stars are kind. The moment stretched between them, fragile and infinite, before Taylor finally turned toward the shuttle. The ramp lowered, a soft hiss escaping as the airlocks disengaged. Every step felt heavier than the last, but she forced herself forward. This was her decision. Her choice. She paused at the threshold, glancing back one final time. Varion stood unmoving, watching her go. A warrior bidding farewell not to a battle, but to something far more personal. Then, with a deep breath, she stepped inside. The journey back to Earth was surreal. As the shuttle descended through the atmosphere, the familiar lights of the world below came into view. Cities glittered beneath her like scattered diamonds, a reminder of the life she had left behind. But it wasn't the same anymore. She wasn't the same. The moment she stepped off the shuttle, the weight of reality hit her. The world still saw her as Taylor Swift, global superstar, but they could never understand what she had seen, what she had felt. She was home, but her heart remained among the stars. Weeks passed. She returned to the stage, to the flashing cameras, the roaring crowds. But every song she wrote carried something different now, a longing, a promise, a story hidden between the notes. A story of war and love, of choices and sacrifices, of a warrior who had shown her a universe beyond her own. She often found herself looking up at the night sky, searching, hoping. And somewhere, across the vast expanse of space, Varion did the same. Because some connections, no matter how improbable, were written in the stars.